A man in a tweed jacket and a bow tie, sitting perfectly still in a little boat, arms folded, wearing a hat, with an expression of complete and total boredom on his face. Now picture a giant saw coming down and cutting that boat clean in half beneath him. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't grab the sides. He just sits there in the back half, calm as a Sunday morning, and then he starts the motor and drives away, leaving the front of his boat bobbing in the water behind him. That photograph ran in a magazine that the whole country read, and it changed boating forever, and the man in the bow tie was proving something no boat in history had ever been able to promise. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. This is the full story, not the corporate version, the human one. But before we get to that saw, I need you to remember something, and if you were a kid in this country in the 60s, you already do. There was a little white boat on your television every single week. Two boys, a dolphin named Flipper, and a small boat skimming across the sparkling water of the Florida Keys, off on another adventure while you sat cross-legged on the living room floor, wishing with everything in you that you were in that boat with them. That boat was a Boston whaler, and for a whole generation of American kids, it wasn't a boat at all. It was freedom. It was the thing you were going to have someday. When you were grown, when you were finally out on the open water with the sun on your face and nobody telling you when to come home. And maybe you never did get one. Maybe life happened the way it happens, the job and the mortgage and the kids, and that little white boat stayed a picture in the back of your mind, filed away with all the other things you were sure you'd do someday. That's all right. Most of us never got the boat, but almost none of us ever forgot wanting it. That's how you know a thing was really something special, isn't it? Not whether you got it, whether you can still feel all these years later exactly how badly you wanted it. A comedian you all know once said it better than I can. He said that little whaler was the boat he wanted when he was 15 years old, and he could never scrape the money together, and that he used to draw the logo in the margins of his school books, just dreaming of the day he'd own one. Think about that. A boat so beautiful, so full of promise, that children drew it in their notebooks the way other kids drew rocket ships. That is the boat we're talking about today, and it came from the mind of a man almost nobody remembers. His name was Dick Fisher, and he was not a boat builder, not even close. He was a Harvard man, class of 1936, and here's the part I love. He studied philosophy, not engineering, not business, philosophy. He made his living building little electrical parts, the relay switches inside traffic lights, of all things. But Dick Fisher had a restless kind of mind, the kind that lies awake at night turning an idea over and over, and the idea that wouldn't let him sleep was a simple one. He wanted to build a small boat that was light and strong and safe. A boat for regular people, a boat that a working family could actually own. And in the middle of the 1950s, he heard about a brand new material, a foam, light as a whisper, and it floated like nothing anyone had ever seen. And Fisher had a thought that would change everything. What if you didn't just put the foam in the boat? What if you built the boat out of it? What if you poured that foam right between two skins of fiberglass so that the whole hull, every inch of it, was filled with something that simply would not sink? He built a little foam model, and he showed it to a friend. And thank God he did, because that friend was one of the most brilliant boat designers who ever lived. His name was Ray Hunt, and if you know boats, you know that name, even if you've never heard it, because you've felt his work under your feet. Ray Hunt was the man who gave the world the deep V hull, the shape that lets a boat knife through rough water instead of slamming across it. Hunt looked at Fisher's funny little foam boat, and he saw what Fisher couldn't quite see yet. He took the idea home, and he drew a hull unlike anything else on the water, with a run of shapes along the bottom that made the little boat ride flat and steady and safe. Two men, one who understood how things float, and one who understood how they fly across the waves, and between them they built something brand new. They filled it with foam, sealed between fiberglass, with a secret set of braces inside that the company would guard as a treasure for decades. And when it was done, they took that first little 13-footer out and ran her 120 miles down the coast and back, just to see what she'd do. Fisher's only complaint in that dry way of his was that she was wetter than hell, but she was strong, she was steady, and she would not sink. They showed her at the New York Boat Show in 1958. People walked right up and stared. Some of them laughed and called her the Blue Bathtub because she didn't look like the sleek wooden boats of the day. She looked like a toy, and that laughter is exactly why Dick Fisher, the quiet philosophy major who built traffic light switches, was about to do the boldest thing anyone in the boat business had ever done. Because how do you make the whole world believe a claim that sounds impossible? How do you convince a man who's been boating his whole life that this little bathtub genuinely cannot sink? You don't tell him, you show him. So one day in 1961, Dick Fisher put on his best tweed jacket, a crisp bow tie, and a hat. He sat down in the back of one of his own 13-foot boats. He folded his arms, and in front of the cameras of Life magazine, the biggest magazine in America, a magazine that landed on almost every coffee table in the country, he had a man take an enormous saw and cut his boat completely in half. And here's the detail that makes the whole thing perfect. He didn't look excited. He didn't look scared. In every single photograph, Dick Fisher looks utterly, magnificently bored, like a man waiting for a bus, like sawing a boat in half beneath him was the least interesting thing that had happened to him all week. The saw goes all the way through. The boat comes apart into two pieces. The front half just sits there, floating, refusing to go under. And then Fisher, still looking half asleep, starts the motor on the back half and calmly drives away. Can you imagine opening your magazine at the kitchen table and seeing that? The whole country did, and the whole country understood in a single glance what would have taken 10,000 words to explain. This boat cannot sink. You could cut it in half, and it would still bring you home. Overnight, everyone knew the name Boston Whaler. The orders poured in. That one photograph, that one gloriously calm man in a bow tie, built an empire. But here's what I want you to understand, because this is the part that lifts this story above a clever advertising trick. It wasn't a trick. It was true. Every word of it. Out on the real water, in real trouble, these boats did exactly what that photograph promised. Fishermen came home in whalers with holes the size of a dinner plate punched through the bottom. The boat still floating, still running, still carrying them back to the dock. Years later, when a great hurricane swept through and tore a marina to pieces, one family's whaler was found sitting on its trailer, having floated right through a wall of water that destroyed everything around it, and all it had to show for it were a few scratches in the paint. A father could put his kids in that boat and never once lie awake wondering if it would let them down, because it wouldn't. It couldn't. That was the whole point. And I think that's the thing people forget about why we loved these boats so much. It was never really about the speed or the looks or even the price. It was about trust. When you take the people you love most out onto the open water, some quiet part of you is always doing the math, always listening to the engine, always watching the sky. The Whaler was the one boat that let a man stop doing that math and just be with his family. It carried the fear for you, and a boat that carries your fear so you can enjoy your own children, well, that's not a machine anymore. That's something close to a friend. And Dick Fisher did something with that idea that almost no inventor ever gets to do. He didn't just build a safer boat, he made the whole country safer. His foam idea worked so well, proved itself so completely, that it eventually became the law of the land. To this day, every small boat built in America has to be able to float when it's swamped. Every family out on any little boat this weekend, on any lake in this country, is a little bit safer because a philosophy major in a bow tie sat still while they sawed his boat in half. He never once got the credit for that. He should have. For a while, everything was golden. The little company grew. They built the first boat you could stand up and steer from a console in the middle. They built the Montauk, the honest little workhorse that became the boat at 10,000 family docks. Fathers taught sons to run them. Sons taught their own sons. The Whaler became part of the American summer, as much as the smell of sunscreen and the sound of a screen door. And then, the way these stories so often go, the man let go of the thing he made. Dick Fisher only owned Boston Whaler for 11 years. He sold it, and it began to pass from hand to hand, and each new owner was a little further from the water than the last. It went to a company that sold exercise machines on television. Then it was bought by a shoe company. Yes, a shoe company owned the unsinkable boat, and after a few years they sold it at a staggering loss, because it turns out that making sneakers doesn't teach you the first thing about the sea. The whole operation was packed up and moved 1,000 miles south. The men and women in Massachusetts who had built these boats with their own hands, who knew every secret of that foam and that hull, were left behind. And then came the two blows that land the hardest. In the autumn of 1995, Dick Fisher died at 81 years old, far from the cold New England water where his little boat was born. And just a few months after that, they sent the bulldozers to the old factory in Massachusetts, the building where the legend had started, where the blue bathtub was born, where a man in a bow tie once proved the impossible. They tore it right down to the ground. And do you know what they built on the spot where the unsinkable boat was invented? A hardware store. You can walk in today and buy a bag of screws standing exactly where Dick Fisher changed boating forever, and there is not one thing to tell you what once stood on that ground. Think about the people who worked there, the men and women who could lay up a hull in their sleep, who knew the exact smell of the resin curing, who had built a boat that saved lives with their own two hands. They drove past that spot afterward and saw a parking lot. No plaque, no sign, no memory, just a place to buy paint and garden hoses sitting on top of the ground where something wonderful used to be made. That's the part that ought to make you a little angry, and it's all right if it does. And here is the last wound, the quiet one, the classic whaler, that funny, beloved, unsinkable shape that Ray Hunt drew and a whole generation grew up on. They stopped building it. The new owners smoothed it out, changed it, made it like every other boat. The blue bathtub that children drew in their school books was gone. The name lived on. The soul of the thing did not. So you'd think that's the end of it. The inventor gone, the factory a hardware store, the boat itself quietly discontinued. A story that fades out like so many others, except it doesn't. And this is why I wanted to tell you this one, because you cannot sink these boats. That was never just an advertising slogan. It turned out to be a kind of promise that reached all the way down through the years, all across this country. Right now, tonight, those old classic whalers are still out there. Tens of thousands of them, still floating, still running, because the one thing they were built to do above all else was refuse to die. And the people who love them will not let them go. There's a man who grew up seeing whalers everywhere, common as mailboxes. And when it came time to get a boat for his own family, he didn't want a shiny new one. His father spotted an old Montauk sitting forgotten in a parking lot, and the two of them hauled it home and brought it back to life with their own hands, sanding and fitting and caring for it. A father and a son, exactly the way it was always meant to be. That story is happening in 1,000 garages this very winter. Old men and their grandchildren kneeling beside a faded white hull, bringing back the boat they wanted when they were 15 and drew in the margins of their school books. They paved over the factory, they changed the hull, they let a shoe company own it, and they buried the man who dreamed it up. But they never could do the one thing to a Boston whaler that you cannot do to a Boston whaler. They never could make it sink. And somewhere out there this summer, a kid is going to sit in the bow of an old white boat for the very first time, feeling the sun and the spray and that first sweet taste of freedom on the open water, exactly the way you did, exactly the way those two boys and a dolphin did on your television all those years ago. He won't know the name Dick Fisher. He won't know about the bow tie or the saw or the hardware store, but he'll feel the same thing you felt, and that is the only monument a man like that ever really needed. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it is ready.